Synthesis. Photosynthesis is carried out by organisms that we call autotrophs. This includes plants, algae, and also some of the bacteria, the cyanobacteria. These organisms can capture sunlight and that energy and produce glucose. So they feed not only themselves, but virtually every organism, every food chain on our planet can be traced back to either plants or to algae. So visible light is going to be captured by some pigments, primarily chlorophylls and carotenoids. And this sunlight, which is kinetic energy, radiant energy, is going to be transformed into chemical energy. We're going to form some chemical bonds, eventually forming the sugar glucose. That glucose then can feed all of the heterotrophs through the processes of cellular respiration that we saw in the previous lesson. So here is the summary reaction. The summary equation, light plus 6 molecules of H2O plus 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, and the end product is glucose and oxygen. Another very important thing that occurs as a result of photosynthesis, the oxygen is released as a byproduct. And so organisms that require the oxygen for their own cellular respiration benefit not only from the production of glucose, but also from the release of oxygen. A little bit about light. Light many times behaves like a particle called a photon. It's a little packet of energy. But photons also travel in waves, and so in some ways light behaves as a wave, in other ways it behaves as a particle. There are a number of different wavelengths that we call the electromagnetic spectrum, and so there is an inverse relationship between the wavelength and the energy contained in that wavelength. So beginning at the top, very, very short waves of electromagnetic radiation like gamma rays and X-rays have a short wavelength but very high energy. If we look down at the other end of the spectrum, things like radio waves and microwaves have a very long wavelength and much lower energy. Right in the very middle of the spectrum are the wavelengths that are visible light. That is light that we can detect with our eye. The wavelengths of visible light go from about 380 nanometers up to about 750 nanometers. If we were to split these various wavelengths, we would see all of the colors of the spectrum, the colors of the rainbow. Chlorophylls absorb maximally at around 500 and also at about 700 nanometers. And so this corresponds to violet and blue light or orange and red light. Chlorophyll does not absorb green light. And so the reason that plants appear green is because those wavelengths. Photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplast. The chloroplasts are located in some cells called mesophyll cells. So we're going to look at a little bit more detail of the chloroplast in just a moment. There are also some other structures on the leaf called a stoma, and this is how the gas CO2 can enter into the leaf and diffuse into the chloroplast, and then as oxygen is released as a byproduct, it can also diffuse out of the chloroplast and out of the stoma. The chloroplast is a double membrane structure, has two layers of membrane. The inner space is called the stroma. Parts of these reactions, these photosynthetic reactions, are going to occur in the stroma. And then distributed throughout the stroma are some membranes that are called the thylakoid. The actual photosynthetic pigments that capture light are found embedded in the thylakoid. So parts of the reactions occur in the thylakoid, other reactions of photosynthesis occur in the stroma. those thylakoids make up something called a grana. And this is the stack that you see here in the diagram. It looks kind of like a stack of coins. Again, this is made up of that thylakoid membrane where the photosynthetic pigments are located.